Cowabunga, all you dudes and dudettes. Today we're checking out Cyberfrog Rekt Planet. Be sure to like that smash button, and here we go. Finally, at long last, the highly anticipated sequel to comic book legend Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog Bloodhoney has emerged from its dormancy, and Cyberfrog Rekt Planet has taken its first steps onto the scene of public view. Cyberfrog Bloodhoney was another comic I reviewed, a link to which you can find here. So, naturally, it's time to dig into the scrumptious sequel and see what the long-awaited astonishing tale of amphibious action has in store for its reader. While I did enjoy Cyberfrog Bloodhoney overall, due to its nature as a prequel that spent most of its time just explaining things, it wasn't really a good indicator of Van Sciver's writing skill. And so, while the writer has considerable skill in making characters that feel unique and alive, I'd hoped that Rekt Planet would stand as a far more substantial test of his ability to craft a working narrative. And by this criteria, Rekt Planet certainly delivers. But let's look at the details, shall we? Our tale begins in the desecrated ruins of New Jersey, immediately pulling the reader into its post-apocalyptic setting. Meanwhile, we are given the inner monologue of a dying cyberfrog, giving us a glimpse of future events. This is typically a bold move that indicates a writer's confidence. In comparison, this is like attempting a trick shot, or a baseball player calling a home run before the ball is even thrown. Since you're setting an expectation with a dramatically significant event, giving yourself the challenge of writing a story that logically and believably leads to said event. It's always impressive to see when pulled off well. It all depends on if the author's confidence is justified, or merely hubris. And this is where our main story begins, a little before the end of Bloodhoney, with Cyberfrog reawakening and finding his way out of the wasp-infested city and into the wilderness. But why start here if Cyberfrog Bloodhoney already covered this? Because we're given a different perspective on Cyberfrog's awakening, and this new perspective is none other than the Vespas, Cyberfrog's blood enemy and the vile alien swarm that dominated the Earth. They sit back and watch with curiosity as Cyberfrog hops through their city, until, of course, one decides to follow. This is where we cut to Cyberfrog being greeted by his old friend, and Lily's mother, Heather Swain. They have a somewhat tearful reunion, and we get a reminder that Cyberfrog is offline, disconnected from his mother, and therefore has no hope of defeating the Vespas. But the reunion is short-lived, when a guy named Bob comes running to warn Heather of an approaching Vespas, only to immediately die from a sting. Cyberfrog jumps into action, and we get a cool fight scene which leaves Cyberfrog injured. Next, Heather leads Cyberfrog to the small haven where she and the community of survivors have settled down. And Cyberfrog is immediately shot by the de facto leader of the community, a man named Colin. Then we cut to a mysterious character named Scorpion, who seems to have cracked the code of the Vespas language, and has decided to assist Cyberfrog by giving him the secret. From here begins what could be called the status quo. Much of the story involves Cyberfrog trying to fit into this new world and this new life. Cyberfrog starts healing in a nearby pond. Meanwhile, Lily clearly doesn't like this new arrival and she remains focused on her quest to find her father. While Heather attempts to make things work, Colin then takes Cyberfrog aside, gives him a villainous little speech before meeting back at Heather's home, where Colin asks for a haircut, a request which Cyberfrog decides to fulfill at once with a pair of hedge clippers. This move embarrasses Colin, angers Heather a bit, but most importantly, it also makes Lily laugh. A significant development, as we'll see. Then there's a party. We get to see Cyberfrog dad sitting in his Big Daddy lawn chair, and of course Colin scheming with a new female antagonist. The newly enthusiastic Lily invites Cyberfrog to play soccer. He agrees, and we have one good day where Cyberfrog, perhaps for the very first time, finds a proper place within a community, a proper home. However, that night, Cyberfrog finds a few Vespas flying in to recover the corpse of the one swatted earlier, signifying that the hive just might be on alert. The next few days pass normally. Cyberfrog and Lily have some bonding time doing chores and playing chess. One day, Heather has to go off to help gather items from a recently discovered big box store that hasn't been pillaged yet. Cyberfrog wants to join, but Heather insists that he stay behind to watch Lily, and Heather leaving signifies the end to the brief peace they once had. blood. Witch Lady appears to remind Lily of her father and guilts her into attempting to find him again. Lily does inform Cyberfrog of her intentions, but before the discussion can go too far, the settlement is attacked by an odd Robocat. Cyberfrog fights Robocat vomits out science, and injects Cyberfrog with language. Colin blames Cyberfrog for the recent troubles, and Lily goes off on her own to search for her father. At least, she tries. Strap in and get ready, we're in the endgame now, folks. There's a violent confrontation between Heather and Witch Lady/Anne, when Witch Lady reveals that she was the one who sent Lily off. Tensions rise and grow even higher when the Vespa swarm the encampment. Cyberfrog suddenly finds he can understand the Vespa's language, a useful new addition to his repertoire. Lily's gone. The community and even Heather is in danger. Cyberfrog nearly died fighting just one, and now he's facing down an entire swarm. And to make matters worse, the Vespas are whiny, narcissistic Twitter types who claim to have done nothing wrong, and accuse Cyberfrog of being the one true villain. For example, when referring to the wasp that died earlier in the comic, the one who killed Bob and who threatened to kill Lily and Heather Swain, they had this to say. You murdered our friend in cold blood. Help me to understand. You claim to never kill and that you admit to murdering Vespas Vilgrex in cold blood? You've agreed it was in cold blood. We heard you. Referring to a joke Cyberfrog had made earlier about murdering their friend in cold blood because he's a frog, and therefore everything he does is in cold blood. Perfectly mimicking the inability for a soulless Twitter-ish W to understand humor on any given level. On that note, it's also fairly accurate to have the Vespas addicted to the fear and the suffering of the innocent, just like real social justice warriors. We love panic. Quick exhalations of carbon dioxide are intoxicating. Now is not the time to defend yourself. Now is not the time for you to do anything except reflect and think about how you can be better. Heartless, merciless, completely irredeemable monsters. Truly the perfect villains for every occasion. And the Vespas are pretty scary too, I suppose. Now we see Cyberfrog in the dying state that was hinted at in the beginning. Damaged, broken, and prepared to die for the human race. Then, when all seems lost, Salamandroid is not only revealed to be alive, but he arrives in their darkest hour carrying the heart of their mother. And just as Heather saw hope within Cyberfrog, Salamandroid reunites their odd little family, changing a vague hope from a lowly wish to an actual chance at victory. Now for the big boy question. How's the story? One thing I can say about Van Sciver's writing is that he really knows how to construct an effective introduction. In both Bloodhoney and Rekt Planet, Van Sciver gives us a slow, measured, and meaningful opening. Specifically taking advantage of the visual medium aspect of the comic, hitting us with striking imagery within the first few pages to establish the setting. A mysterious escaping pod from an alien planet while the life within mourns its terrible failure in Cyberfrog Bloodhoney, and then the ruins of New Jersey covered in honey and hive, giving us glimpses of the once majestical heights of the human race, now a crumbled memory. The art is well done and the colors are vibrant. However, the mechanical reason why they work is because they accomplish the one essential job an introduction should complete. They get the reader to ask a question. In the words of Lee Child, author of the highly successful Jack Reacher series, writing is like cooking. You have to let the reader simmer in the tension. The more you delay the gratification, the more they'll crave it. It's like when you have guests for dinner and don't serve the food immediately. You let them wait a bit. You let them enjoy the aroma before you let them taste it. People are hardwired to pursue answers for questions, and so once a major question is implanted in the reader's mind, the best practice would be to delay the answer. Any effective introduction pulls the reader into a story with a general question. In both Bloodhoney and Rekt Planet, the reader is pushed to ask, what happened? Even if the reader began with Rekt Planet, the drive to find out how human civilization ended, who did it, and who is this character lamenting his own failure goes strong. Again, Van Sciver's skill and familiarity with his characters shines through. There's feeling and dramatic weight, but the mechanically important part is that the dialogue is conveying lament. Lament can breed tension fairly well, specifically the notion of the speaker dying or approaching death full of doubt and regret, almost without hope, clearly leaving behind an innocent life who's in danger, who he can no longer protect. The potential reader might want to see the child protected, and we are forced to ask, what happens? The Vespas can have this world, and I hope they choke on it. But if I said that here, now. It would break her spirit for good, and she's gotta survive this for Lily's sake. Little Lily, who recognized me from that awful tattoo her mother has of me on her shoulder. It was still bleeding when Heather first showed it to me, 22 years ago. Kind of like I'm bleeding on her now. It almost feels like Max Payne is grumbling in my ear. So, of course, I approve. Van Sciver's characterization of his main characters and ability to craft an effective opening remain consistently strong. And as I suspected, Rekt Planet provides a far better narrative than Bloodhoney. Unfortunately, while far better than the previous issue, Rekt Planet did have two major drawbacks, and by that same token, did the narrative equivalent of leaving money on the table. So in a story that should be dramatically heavy, it's clear what Van Sciver was trying to do, and a lot of necessary elements do show up, but they show up a little light. To put it in boxing terms, they stepped up for weigh-in and failed to make weight. Here's what I mean. As another creator of comics, I should probably mention that no work is perfect, and most things I tend to catch in writing are things I myself have done, especially mistakes. A writer should never fear mistakes, they should fear failing to learn from them. So, having said that, let's begin by laying out the story elements we'll focus on the most, shall we? The first thing we should establish is that the character of Lily Owen, thematically speaking, represents hope. Her existence shows that love can blossom even during these dire circumstances. She represents the hopeful future of humanity, and Heather's hope for a better tomorrow. Lily herself holds the hope that she'll one day find her lost father, and ultimately, she represents the hope for Cyberfrog's redemption, since, in his eyes, he failed his obligation to humanity and his mother. The next point, Heather's community has presumably not encountered a Vespas in years. Lily looks about 10 or so and says to Cyberfrog, "The so-called murder hornets can't see us when we wear red. We're invisible to them. They might as well be invisible to me too. I've never seen one. Mom barely wears red anymore, but she still forces me to wear it when I leave camp." The fact that Lily has never seen a Vespas and that Heather no longer wears red on a regular basis tells us that their little community has gone without seeing a Vespas for so long. They've fallen into a state of security, an issue that'll be important later. We also have Lily's quest to find her father. There's the elements of Cyberfrog's origin, as he gets most of his powers through his connection with his mother, Chelsyn. Cyberfrog loves his mother and dedicates himself to the assigned cause of protecting humanity. We have the human antagonists, Colin and Anne/Witch Lady, who are clearly set up as opposition to Cyberfrog and Heather, scheming to conduct a plan that will allow them to retain control over the community. And don't forget the line that ends the introduction segment of the book. "Chelsyn, wherever you are, if you're still alive, you were right about humans, and I am prepared to die for them." A line that hints at a potential character arc for Cyberfrog throughout the Rekt Planet storyline. I know these elements might seem a bit random, but they'll come together in a bit. So now with the game board set, let's dive into things. For this next part, we'll separate the term narrative, which will here refer to the surface level story, the journey the reader sees, like laying eyes on a car and appreciating its sleek style, its fully leather interior, and its chrome paint job. And the term mechanic, which will here refer to the underlying structure needed to tell an effective story. The stuff the average reader doesn't see. The engine of the car, its gears and various fluids that keep it running. Things like the 3-act structure or the hero's journey. As mentioned before, Van Sciver was clearly going for a dramatically heavy story with rising stakes in a stage set in a nearly hopeless situation. Chelsyn is gone, Salamandroid seemingly gone, and human civilization completely gone. And then there's actually an important scene that was both narratively and mechanically well done. Cyberfrog's very first battle with the Vespas. It's narratively well done because it gives us a little blood and guts fairly early on in the comic. We get to see the enemy in battle, and we get to see Cyberfrog literally jump into action. So why is this narratively well done? Because it's engaging fun action, and more importantly, it's cool. And it's mechanically well done because, with the explosive death of Bob, it shows how dangerous the Vespas are. It shows us that the Vespas have evolved and are even tougher now, raising the stakes. We see how normal Cyberfrog, i.e. Cyberfrog without his connection to Chelsyn, matches up to a current year Vespas. And we see that the answer is only barely, since Cyberfrog nearly dies in the battle. But it's not all bad news, since we also learn that Cyberfrog is immune to the Vespa's insta-kill toxin. In short, the fight ties in a lot of necessary information and raises the stakes. The emotional shift even moves from joy when Cyberfrog and Heather meet up again, to fear when the Vespas attack, attacks, to sad that Cyberfrog becomes so critically injured, to glad again to see that he survived, and that Heather and Lily are fine, and that there might be a home waiting for Cyberfrog. In summary, the scene combines an early entertaining battle, weaves in a massive amount of essential information, and gives us proper emotional shifts to solidify this as a properly substantial series of events. And here's the part that will become the most relevant in our own little journey. The scene has a story arc, a beginning, middle, and end, and they're driven by Cyberfrog's actions. The start of the battle, the middle, which is the intense clash between Cyberfrog and the Vespas and their battle for dominance, which takes one twist when we see Cyberfrog get stung and we are left wondering if he'll survive, another when we learn he's immune, and another when Cyberfrog turns the monster's own stinger against itself, winning the battle. An interesting story arc for the battle, and overall very well done. But I mention this point not just to give the book the praise it's properly due, but to establish some information of my own, which leads us to the next part, and that is, no one seems to care about Bob. He was just an expendable pawn sacrificed to show us the deadly nature of the Vespas. Hashtag justice for Bob. And don't worry, the problem isn't about Bob specifically, but his death does lead us to a few more things, like reminding Heather's community of the Vespa's threat, which leads to the community doing nothing. And this even includes Colin for some reason. Other than Cyberfrog joining and Colin threatening, they make sure to keep things running business as usual, which of course leads us to why some of these scenes might feel dramatically light. Normally, I can just take out the hero's journey and quickly point out the problem, since many stories, especially ones written by inexperienced or 2020 era mainstream writers, feel closer to a series of events crudely stapled together rather than a connected story, let alone a functioning arc. However, Rekt Planet has a story arc, a tragic one, and the arc itself actually centers around Lily. In the beginning, when Lily is cold to Cyberfrog, his placement within the community feels uncertain. The moment Cyberfrog sends up to Colin, Lily starts to like Cyberfrog, and the moment Lily starts to like Cyberfrog, and they begin to bond, we've reached the middle of the arc, which, despite being centered on social drama, maintains its significance since things are changing. Then Lily strikes out to find her father again, and tries to tell Cyberfrog, who doesn't listen, causing a rift and acting as an effective foreshadowing for the approaching end. The end is Cyberfrog's battle against the Vespa Swarm, which leaves him in a critical state of injury, and Cyberfrog's defeat leads to Lily's capture by the Vespas. To summarize, Cyberfrog's uncertain placement in the world is signified by Lily's coldness towards him, Cyberfrog finding a place in the new society is signified by Lily's acceptance towards him, and Cyberfrog's tragic failure is signified by Lily's capture and being stolen from him. So to better explore the missing dramatic weight and tension that might have been, I think Freytag's Triangle might be a better tool, because the main drawback of Rekt Planet is not its lack of story arc, but its lack of rising action. Freytag's Triangle divides the story into 6 parts: exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Much of the book surrounds Cyberfrog trying to fit into this new society of survivors. We see him lounging around Heather's house, bonding with Lily, engaging in conflict with Colin, and watching how these humans are trying to live post-fall of civilization. Meanwhile, the Vespas have learned of Cyberfrog's return and begin mobilizing. This is the closest thing the book gets to substantial rising action. However, their growing anger isn't something Cyberfrog has to deal with until the end of the book. Not a lot of connection given until after the final battle, of course, with one important exception. There's a part where Cyberfrog sees a few Vespas approach in the dead of night, collect their slain comrade, and fly off. Cyberfrog watches this go down and even comments, "This can't be good." And then Cyberfrog proceeds to do, well, nothing. It's just business as usual. Cyberfrog and Lily hang out, and Heather leaves to help scavenge for supplies. Action rose and then immediately dropped. Instead of a triangle, we get a tiny peak resting on the story's back like an unsightly boil. In other words, while there is a story arc and things do happen and these things are dramatically interesting, it feels like we're on a road trip but your driver's a stoner and has no set destination. There isn't even a tangible goal in the Rekt Planet storyline that Cyberfrog is striving to achieve. Of course, the easy retort here is to say that the main goal is to defeat the Vespas, but that's like saying Luke Skywalker's main goal was to defeat the Empire. It is a goal, just not a tangible one. How does it defeat the Empire? By destroying the Death Star. Now that's a tangible goal. So how might the Rekt Planet storyline look if we added some rising action and a tangible goal? Of course, there's no one way to go, but one way might be, first, first. Despite the Vespa's threat, Van Sciver made it very clear that the Rekt Planet storyline is really about Cyberfrog trying to find a place in this new world, trying to reconnect with Heather Swain and form a bond with this new society of survivors. It is the story of his emergence after all. These humans have chosen to try to coexist with the Vespas to survive them. But is this okay? When Cyberfrog asked what humans wanted, Chelsin responded by saying, "Most people want the freedom to live as they choose, without fear." And Cyberfrog struggles with his next course of action. Does he even have the right to interfere? Who is he to ruin what they've built, just so he can fulfill a task he failed long ago? If his job is to protect humanity, and the remaining humanity are living without fear, content with coexistence, then is this okay? In fact, this internal struggle is what makes the bulk of the Rekt Planet storyline. Why it's so intriguing despite the overall lack of a tangible goal and substantial rising action. In the end, Rekt Planet actually possesses all the necessary elements to give us both. It just didn't fully utilize these elements. And this is what I meant when I said Rekt Planet did the narrative equivalent of leaving money on the table. For our iteration, we'll ramp up Colin's villainy, toss in a character bonding moment between Cyberfrog and Lily, and complete Cyberfrog's proposed character arc for Rekt Planet. For argument's sake, I may have to take a few creative liberties, but I'll keep them as light as possible. In other words, this is where I take the sections I pointed out earlier and tie them all together. Colin and Anne, aka the Witch Lady, are the noted secondary antagonists in this storyline. And Colin does make some villainous threats to Cyberfrog, shows a kind of de facto command over the community, and even shows concern over Bob's death. Hashtag justice for Bob. Of all the survivors, he's the one who takes the most initiative, at least at first. After Cyberfrog stands up to Colin by giving him a hedge cutter haircut, he kind of backs off, completely. And here is where I'll make the first change and spark a bit of rising action. As noted before, the Vespas have not been seen in years, to the point Lily has never seen one, and even Heather Swain has stopped wearing red. The fact that a murder hornet not only shows up but kills poor old Bob should, one, cause far more of an uproar, but mostly, it should give Colin a lot of potential power. I'm prepared for a whole Whitman sample box of trouble by burying 22 New Jersey transit buses under this very ground, welding them together and creating one of the most impenetrable survival fortresses since Noah built his friggin' ark. And do you know why I did this? Because I want to live. A desperate man, desperate to live, might be driven to do horrific things, especially if he has the advantage of fear. Leave here, now, and take all the danger you bring us with you. Colin tells Cyberfrog to leave, that his help isn't needed or even wanted. More importantly, we learn that Colin's hope is that Cyberfrog will leave, returning full authority to him. Because of course, Cyberfrog even now is a powerful weapon of destruction. He's the only one with the power enough to defy Colin, and if they were to clash, it would end with a clear Cyberfrog victory. And to make things worse, his greatest fears are realized when Cyberfrog humiliates Colin with the hedge cutters. So what will our rising action be? Why, tyranny, of course. To my people, Bob's death was like a shot to the gut. Over the course of the story, Colin could slowly start locking things down, putting more and more restriction over the community, curfew, town watches, cutting down recreation, and limiting free travel from the town. Eventually, no one can do a thing without Colin's permission, and each time he's questioned, Bob will be held up as the grisly reminder of the grisly alternative. All the while, the people will naturally connect Cyberfrog's arrival with their loss of freedom and their loss of peace. Remember Chelsin's words to Cyberfrog? Most people want the freedom to live as they choose, without fear. Most people didn't see the Vespas or Cyberfrog's battle against it. They just know that everything got worse once Cyberfrog arrived. This will not only set up Colin as the central antagonist of the Rekt Planet storyline, but the tangible goal itself. The tangible goal being, of course, to defeat him, and the obvious next step would be for Cyberfrog to take him down. But it's not so clear-cut. This is where Cyberfrog will be bonding with Lily like he does in the normal story, and Lily will still notice something weighing on Cyberfrog's mind, asking what's wrong. Cyberfrog will be contemplating the right move, asking himself if he has the right to interfere in a society that kept Heather and Lily alive all these years. Maybe he should just leave so things can go back to normal. This time, Cyberfrog will talk about his origin with Lily. He'll reveal his internal struggle, the real one, even beyond his failed task to protect humanity. He'll mention his mother Chelsin and his task to protect everyone. But he'll mention how Chelsin had come to Earth looking for a hero to give powers to. Someone strong and and cunning and brave, but then decided to give all that power to a lowly, worthless frog, him. And the real reason he spent all those cold years fighting for a people that despised him was trying to prove to his mother that she didn't make a mistake in choosing him. He tried so hard to make her proud, and failed. And now he's struggling with another decision, another chance, to follow Chelsin's orders and do the right thing. But he isn't sure. He feels there are so few right choices, and too many wrong ones that seem right. And he doesn't want to disappoint Chelsin again. This is where we note that Lily has a similar dedication to her father as Cyberfrog does to his mother. Lily, being a child, might make things a little more simple by mentioning that she may not know everything, but she needs her father like Cyberfrog needs his mother. Maybe she mentions that's part of the reason why she's so desperate to find her father, because in her own way, she also wants to show him she's worthy. Maybe Lily's own confession leads Cyberfrog to conclude that the right thing is the same thing he's always done: protect people from monsters. While Rekt Planet does a nice job connecting Lily and Cyberfrog, highlighting this parallel between Lily and Cyberfrog would lead to a deeper connection. After all, it's easier to connect with someone who shares a similarity to yourself, especially when that similarity is personally meaningful. Brothers in arms share something similar. Two soldiers might not even like each other, but the fact that they fought side by side makes them brothers. Likewise, Lily's deep connection to her dad and Cyberfrog's deep connection to his mother will add some drama and connect the two characters on a deeper level than just hanging out together. I mean, isn't that what spending time together does? Allowing friends or potential friends to find out more about one another? And the following night, as Cyberfrog contemplates his meeting with Lily, he spots the Vespas collect the body of their comrade in the dead of night. He makes up his mind. Everything has been leading to this. No more time for petty games. That night, Anne comes to Lily, who's already feeling guilty about her father. Maybe she told herself that she stopped looking because Colin blocked off travel. But in her heart, she knew it was because she was too content being Cyberfrog's friend. Almost exactly the same as it happened in the original story. And then convinces Lily to go out again despite the new rules. A good daughter wouldn't let some petty rule stop her from looking for her father. Or should I say, only cowards and silly fools allow themselves deterred by petty rules. No daughter worth her salt ever brought to an eager halt. The next morning, Lily tells Cyberfrog, who is preparing to confront Colin, that Colin made Heather go out on a scavenger detail, and that she's going out too. That's when we get an attack from the Robocat that uploads the Vespa's language into Cyberfrog. Colin, of course, uses this attack for one final push against Cyberfrog, the Final Confrontation. This is where we recall the final words from the introduction. Chelsin, wherever you are, if you're still alive, you were right about humans, and I am prepared to die for them. This hints at a character arc for Cyberfrog that will happen at the end, a change within his mindset, since it insinuates that he's gone from fighting from obligation to fighting out of passion. This insinuates the new humanity has proven its worth in Cyberfrog's eyes, so much so that he's willing to dedicate his life to them. But what kind of interactions with humanity does Cyberfrog have? The people who don't pay much attention to him, Colin and Anne who hate him, a somewhat cowardly new humanity who has lost all its will to fight, and has decided to coexist with the Vespas rather than fight for its planet again. It could be because of Heather and Lily, but Cyberfrog already liked them. But if that's the case, then there's no change. Those ending lines would just be reaffirming what we already know. And even worse, we get a Man of Steel situation, where Superman only cared about Lois, and without Lois, he might as well leave. So let's try this. Remember, Cyberfrog was made to fight monsters. He doesn't kill humans. Heather returns and punches out Anne for manipulating Lily like in the original. Colin sees this as a growing problem. First Cyberfrog's public defiance, and now Heather. Defiance was growing. Colin makes his play and orders the exile of Cyberfrog, Heather, and Lily, all to make an example out of them. Colin orders his men to drag them all out of town. Cyberfrog, powerless to interfere, must go along with it. But then, no one complies. This was the last straw. After seeing Cyberfrog rebel, and then Lily, and now Heather defy Colin, and seeing Colin try to exile Heather, a woman who's been nothing but loyal and helpful to the community since the beginning. And this acts as the breaking point. One by one, people leave Colin's side, and stand between him and Heather. It's this spark, this willingness to fight back, that inspires hires Cyberfrog. Despite everything, against all odds, in the face of extinction, and as every member of the community begins siding with Heather against Colin, Cyberfrog sees that humanity was still willing to fight for what it cared about. There was still so much good in ordinary people. Even ordinary people can make a difference and do extraordinary things. Ordinary, Cyberfrog thinks, just like him. See, it's like poetry. It rhymes. At this point, the confrontation might not be technically concluded, but Colin has already been soundly defeated. The authoritarian has been stripped of his authority. However, before the confrontation can conclude one way or the other, the Vespa Swarm arrives and Cyberfrog leaps into action once more. In the community this time, we'll see firsthand how brave and heroic Cyberfrog is, allowing them to gain their own appreciation for him in return. An alternative could be that Colin either sacrifices himself or risks his life in the following Vespa's attack, showing Cyberfrog that even a guy like Colin can have some nobility in his veins, incidentally also giving Colin a character arc of his own. As I mentioned, there's more than one way to do this. Great hope given, and then great hope taken away. And then a bit of hope returns with the arrival of Salamandroid, cleanly leading us into the next chapter of this epic tale. Hey, what are you doing here? I'm back! Literature Angel? That's right, but don't worry, I won't be staying long. Did you know I'm making a comic? A comic? But that doesn't explain what you're doing here. Of course it does! Since I've come to take a peek at your new project, the first volume of Dr. Alpha, Dead Man's Lullaby. Available now on Indiegogo. You mean the one that takes place 20 years before my first book, Dr. Alpha Miracle Child? Where Dr. Alpha wakes up having been injected with a deadly virus by his former villainous colleague and former criminal scientist, Dr. Cloner, and now, having been quite literally stripped of everything, Dr. Alpha has to fight the clock, tearing his way through a small horde of cloner minions and superheroes to finally reach Dr. Cloner and find out why his former best friend betrayed him, all while a mystery slowly unfolds behind the scenes in an action-packed rampage of brutal violence and mad science? Why yes, that one precisely. No. Blast it! Dr. Alpha, Dead Man's Lullaby Volume 1 is currently still in development, but it's currently available on Indiegogo, and, at the moment, there are still a few physical copies of the rare first edition version of my first book, Dr. Alpha Miracle Child. But copies are gradually running out, so act quickly if you want to snag a copy. Unfortunately, LitDev here is a bad guy, and so, while Indiegogo saw fit to take thousands of dollars from the campaign for so-called platform fees, they also decided to shadowban the project without reason or warning, which means, as of right now, you'll find it difficult to discover the book on Google or the Indiegogo website. The only way to find the project at the moment is through a direct link like this one. Dr. Alpha Dead Man's Lullaby has been split into 2 volumes, and the storyline will conclude with the second installment. However, Volume 1 alone is still 70+ pages of action and drama, so don't miss out. I mean, not even Indiegogo could handle a man this toxic.